This is Stephanie at Hightower Stitching with today's video, hand stitching a fancy Dresden plate. There are many different patterns for doing a Dresden plate, but some of the basic components of having a successful sewing experience follow the same steps. And what I wanted to do was share with you some of the things that I do that have helped me make the Dresden plate so that it will do what I want it to do. This one is going to be appliqued on top of a square. And you can also use these same ideas when you're doing the fan and you have the inset in the center. So I want to start you at the very beginning and work our way through. The plate that I haven't done before goes on a 16-inch piece of backing. And you can see on the sample they did it on a pink. The nice thing about this, many years ago, it came with plastic templates. These are the main templates for this particular Dresden plate. And I cut them out very carefully on the plastic. And then I went and I put holes in them where the beginning and the end is. So this one's, there's 4 holes. You can use a nail. I used an ice pick for this one and it worked pretty good. Just be real careful as you poke in and come back out. Don't poke it all the way through because you get this really big hole. The other thing is with the templates, they show you the way that you should lay them on the grain. And there's the grain lines for each one of those. Now, these you can cut by turning them. You can either make a stack and cut them out, or you can take and lay it, and then you can fit the next one on there, and then the next one, and do a couple of layers and cut those out. Now, let's say that it didn't come with the plastic. Well, all of the magazines, and even this particular piece, has the actual pattern pieces on the back. And so even for this project, I went ahead and made a copy of those because I was going to use some of those lines to help me when I got ready to sew. So I've come over here, and here's the one that I copied. And here was some template plastic. I'm sure you have a different idea about that. And you can get them in different thicknesses. And the other thing that is nice for this project, if you have applique pins, which are smaller and shorter than the other pins, that'll be nice for not having your thread get caught in there. But you don't have to have them. You can just use a regular one. And I'll show you what I did with the paper ones in just a minute. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start the sewing, and we're going to go through 4 basic stages and with hints for making this come out as much as you want it to, because you don't want to go and sew all of those petals together and then find out you got too much material because your seams were not big enough, or you make your seams too big and all of a sudden you're short by the time you get to the end of the flower. As you see, I have already sewn together 3 petals. And now you can see the black line, and that really helped me to know that I had gotten nice coverage on the front and the back. There's the second one there. So now I'm going to start the first one. This is the first part to watch out for. Remember, you poked the holes in your template. Now these are magic marker. Don't use magic marker. But these dots are going to be my line. And I tend to sew from the outside in. But you also notice that I have taken my ruler, and even after sewing for these many years, I will take my ruler, lay it down there, and draw a line from one dot to the other. Because remember, we were talking about don't let your seams be too small or too big. And so I'm going to go right in there, and there's a other piece has got a dot on it. So I'm going to line those up. I'm going to use my sharp needle. I'm going to use little stitches, that's really fun once you get going and you've got your thread. Now you won't use black thread. If you have stronger thread that you can pull on and it doesn't break, you can use one string to do it. But because I wanted you to see this, I did a double black, which if you just use a single thread, then it will really lay down nicely when you open the seam up. And we'll set this down towards the table because I like to anchor on something. And then I can go down and up. And even if you only get 2 stitches, it doesn't matter. It's like a run. It's a nice run. And I'm just going to take that all the way to the end, making those stitches. And remember, looking back and make sure you're catching it good. And what I would do is sew all the way to the end, and then do that, lock it in by doing a couple of repeats over the top of it. All right, here is one of the places where I used the extra template that I made and then put it on cardboard, and I just stapled it on there. The reason I did that was I came up here and cut off where that seam line is, because I wanted to use it to set in and mark with something like a mechanical pencil. And you'll see that I have marked that on these 2 pieces. This is part 2 of what I wanted you to see. This will save you some aggravation. You've got your pieces put together. All right, now you've got a color. It doesn't matter. You want a lighter color. You're going to take this out later, but you're going to make a running stitch. And these don't have to be little. You're not doing those joining it. This is just to let you know where it is. They can't be too far apart, but don't. And so you're just going to make a running stitch, which is just up and down, and stay on that line. And there I've just used a single thread. Because one of the parts that always aggravated me was getting the top to be nice and rounded. And when you look at what I've already done, these were the first 2 petals. I was really pleased with those because they were nice and round. And how that happens is part 3. Okay, I'm going to take and fold back on that line where that stitching is. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do another running stitch so that it holds it in place. And then you're going to move your fingers over, roll down the next part, and you can see that's nice and round, and put in those 2 stitches. And this it takes time, but it's going to take you time if you did it just without that extra stitching at the top. But the effect at the end is worth it. And if you're doing this as a project for someone you love or for a friend, it's well worth it. And see, I just keep turning it, and you turn it with your hand to roll it to the back. And that was part 3. And you actually get a little bit faster at it as you go. And you can just keep going from this petal, jump to the next petal, and keep going. All right, this is part 4. All right, these were the last 2 pieces. This is going to be the center that goes in. And I'll show you in a minute. There's 2 ways that you can do this. You can do this center and applique it to the top, or you can sew it into the center of the flowers. And I did that once, and I said, I think I like it better because most of the time, I take and set it on top and applique it in. So either way, you're going to need to do what I've got right here. Here is the center, the yellow. Now you can see how I prepped it. I put a black dot where the beginning and endings are. I have drawn the seam line through there, and I have marked the midpoint on all the sides all the way around. Then on the blue part, I've done my dots on both ends, start and end, but you can see I've also made my seam. And I used that piece of cardboard with another template. I cut it off at the seam, and what I do is I laid it down with the dot from one side to the other, and then made that line, and I did it on both sides. Now, the other piece of prep is to cut little clips on your curve, on that yellow part. This is going to be important. It's going to make it turn out so nice. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my blue and I'm going to put it at the dot. And here's where you can use those little pins like I was showing you a minute ago, or just use your regular pin just to hold it to get ready. Go to the other end. Okay, those center marks come next. So there was my center, and there was my center. I'm going to mark that. All right, now look at that all those have opened up. I'm going to slide my finger back in. I get it back where I want it, slide my finger back in it. And I'm ready to start at the pin. And I'm going to make little stitches. And then if I need to stop, and I usually do, and make sure that that's opened and that it's still left at the same place. They're both together. And I'm going to keep going. And this is worth the trouble of stopping and mark and getting your fingers and everything in the right place. And I'm going to go all the way up. And I'll stop in just a second. All right, and I would work my way all the way around, make sure those are open, and go down and close off right there. All right, so if I did that, when I get done, you can see I've already got a nice curve started on this piece, and it'll curve into that. And when you get finished, this will have all four parts on it. There was my curve line on the other one, and there were my stitch lines on the back. Here are two of the Dresden plates that I started at the beginning. Now this particular one, there's two things about this one. One, that yellow and the yellow, that really doesn't help the center. And so stick with something that's got more of color in it. But when you turn over on the back, you can see this is the one where I sewed them together, just like a regular seam, you know. And I did, to get my round part again on this outside, I marked where those parts were. So now compare that, and then here's a green one, and right away you can tell the green pops, and that's a nice thing. This one is appliqued, and with the tiny stitches that you do to applique, I actually appliqued that with black thread, and you can't see it. So that's pretty neat. But then you can see the edges that I did, and this one turned out pretty nice. There's one that I didn't like, but I think's probably where I started, going around and doing the first lines on the seam line. And the last thing I'd like to share is, you know, I said that you could do it with the fan also. After you know that, if you look at this, is a quilt I made a long time ago for my daughter. And this is a fan, but here again, you can see these are like the petals. And that would be important then, to have your seams be the right way. And then here's another one. Here again, I like to put them over the top and applique them in. And this was a half circle that was put on this one. And this is a fan. And it's a lot of fun too, because I just used all different colors. And this was one of the first Dresden plates that I ever did. That I did this one for my mother-in-law in the 80s. And it's really a fun pattern. There again, I used different colors, but colors that went together. And this center is just a little circle that is appliqued to the top. So there are a lot of different ways that you can do this. This is Stephanie at Hightower Stitching. I hope you'll give yourself a chance to try out a great Dresden pattern and have fun with it. Please subscribe and like.